welcome to the very first episode of Halva for the Heart, Dying and Grieving in Diaspora. My name is Misha. I am a death doula and grief tender, and I am starting a business called Halva's Death Care. And we'll get into why my business is called that and why this podcast is called Halva for the Heart in another episode. I promise we'll get there. But today I'm just so excited to start this episode by talking about an event I'll be hosting for Annual Grief in Public Day. So I just want to jump right on into that discussion because I'm just so excited about how an event like this can help so many people. So the event is, like I said, for Annual Grief in Public Day, which is technically April 27th, but I'm not available that day, so I'm going to be hosting it on April 26th instead. And if you're in Seoul, like me, you are absolutely welcome to attend. But this episode is less a promotion of the event and more about why I chose to host this sort of event for Annual Grief in Public Day and why I think it's so important. Annual Grief in Public Day is a day to bring our grief out into the world. You know, we're so often told by society that grief needs to be done in private and can only be done in private. And that, like, oh, if you're sad, we don't want to see that, you know, like keep that at home, close the door. And so much of my grief has been in private, but I do try to, when I feel the wave of grief coming and I'm in public, I do try to allow it to come. But having said that, even if I am in public, I'm still not often in a community space where that grief is welcome and where that grief is supported. So Annual Grief in Public Day is a way. It's a day for us to acknowledge that we're all carrying grief and speak it out loud with each other and hopefully support one another through it. So when I was thinking about what sort of event I could hold for Annual Grief in Public Day, I was sitting in front of my altar one morning and I was asking my ancestors and my guardians, how can I best serve? How can I best serve as a death doula? And what can I create for Annual Grief in Public Day that will allow healing in my community? And the message I got was to create a grief walk. I didn't really know what that was. It just kind of came to me that just like walking. It like felt too simple to be like, if I had intellectualized this, I probably wouldn't have come up with that idea because it's just walking. You know, like who would want to come to something that's so simple in terms of like, oh, I want participants, you know, I want people to show up. But as I sat with it and I listened to the message I was receiving, I think that the simplicity is the key, you know. Grief doesn't necessarily need a whole lot. Grief just needs presence, needs to be witnessed, and needs to be moved through the body. So part of why this event, I feel like, is so needed and is a good way to teach people that like grief work doesn't have to be so intense. It's because so often we're kind of told like, oh, if you're struggling with grief, go see a grief counselor or go to this group therapy for grief. You know, like it's always talk therapy. Find someone you can talk to, you know, and talking is great. I'm not saying talking is not great. It is very important to tell our grief stories and to put words to it and to like make sense of what happened in our brains. That is important. But the story is for the brain, right? And that's not where all the grief lives. The grief lives in our body. So how do we work with the grief that's in our body if it's not through talking, if it's not through storytelling? Well, the body, there's a few different ways. But one of the easiest ways is just to move your body. And one of the easiest ways to move your body is to go for a walk. And walking in particular is way more healing than people realize, particularly because of the bilateral movement of and the rhythmic movement, the left, right, left, right, left, right. If you know anything about EMDR, EMDR is a therapy used for people with trauma, and no one actually knows how it works. It's just kind of like, it works, so we do it. But how it's done is you're instructed to tell the story and like kind of relive the story of your trauma while following a dot on a screen as it goes back and forth, left and right, following it with your eyes. And it's theorized that the bilateral stimulation of moving your eyes left and right as you're talking about this trauma helps your body in some way, we don't know how, it helps your body integrate the story and to lessen the traumatic effect of it. And that can be done with anything that is a bilateral stimulant. So that can be moving your eyes back and forth. It can be one thing that I love to do is bilateral drawing. So taking two markers in both your hands and drawing with both your left and right hands at once. And that, like, if you haven't tried it, it immediately calms your nervous system. It pulls you out of your brain and pulls you into your body. It's very calming. And walking, same sort of thing. Walking is bilateral stimulation for your body. So if we're walking, as we're talking about our grief and telling that story in the same way that you do during EMDR therapy, that can help lessen the trauma, lessen the impact of the grief in the same way that it works for trauma therapy. So part of this grief walk event that I'll be hosting will be an invitation to, I'm not going to require people to talk and tell the stories, it's all optional, but an invitation to tell their stories around their grief while walking, while letting the body move in a bilateral way. And like I said, with the rhythm of the step, the rhythm, our bodies respond to rhythm. Everything soothing that we do to self-soothe is rhythmic. Deep breaths in, out, swaying back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And even like the vibrations of a lullaby when you're singing and hearing music play or drumming, it's the rhythm that kind of like vibrates the body and calms it down. So that's another reason why walking is such a beautifully simple thing we can do in our grief. Now you could go out and take a walk by yourself when you're feeling a moment of grief. The reason why I'm encouraging people to do it in a group is partially because, like I mentioned, we're so often told that we have to grieve in private. But we don't have to grieve in private. And in fact, most of our ancestors grieved communally, because they knew that in order to grieve fully, in order to process our grief, and to not be, I guess the question here is, what's the goal, right? What is the goal with grief? Are we trying to like get past it? I don't think so. I think our grief has so much to teach us, and we can learn so much from it. But we don't want to get stuck. We don't want to get stuck in the part of the grief. I don't want to say stages because there aren't stages, but we don't want to get stuck in the deep trenches of sorrow, right? Because that's debilitating. If you've ever been in that sort of grief, you know it's debilitating. We want our grief instead to remind us of our humanity. We want our grief to help us connect with other people. For me, grief has taught me empathy. By having experienced deep grief and worked through it, I'm able to see what other people are grieving, and I'm able to see their humanity and connect with them through grief, So I say all this to say that our goal is not to heal our grief and move on. That's not our goal. But our goal is to make friends with our grief have it be a companion in our life, because if you've gone through grief, you know this. You're not going to heal your grief and be like, that's done, thank God, moving on with my life now. No, like if you've experienced a tremendous loss, or it doesn't even have to necessarily be a loss. If you're grieving something, if you've awakened to a grief, oftentimes it's not like a very obvious thing that we've lost. Sometimes it's just something we've woken up to. If you're holding grief in your body, you know that grief doesn't go anywhere. Grief transforms you and it shifts itself, but it doesn't leave. It's always there. It'll stick around forever. Grief is our forever companion. And so instead of like shoving it deep down and ignoring it, or only addressing it when we're in private, allowing it to be a friend to us, and talking about it in community openly, allowing others to support us and supporting others with their grief, we feel so much less alone in our grief, which is huge. But also we're able to see how other people grieve, how we all grieve, and to build that community that we're longing for. You know, we're in this world now where hyper individualism and capitalism is falling apart. It's crumbling around us, and while we're celebrating that, we also don't know what to build in its place. And people keep talking about collective care, community care, but what does that look like? And how can we build that without acknowledging our grief, our shared grief? You know, true community is difficult to build without sharing our grief with those that we're trying to build community with. Sharing your grief with others and seeing their grief, like I said, builds empathy, but beyond empathy builds trust, and it builds solidarity. If I see your grief, if I feel your grief as deeply as I feel my grief, whatever is causing you grief matters to me. Whatever injustice or impression or loss that you've experienced that is causing you to grieve, causing you this heavy grief that I can relate to, that I mean, not exactly, but I feel grief and I feel your grief, that builds a reason to fight for someone, and that is the basis of solidarity. And we can't have a community, we can't build a community, a strong, robust community, without building solidarity and these reasons to fight for and alongside others. And we can't build true solidarity without seeing each other's grief, because grief is the foundation of empathy, and empathy is the foundation of solidarity. I know it kind of seemed like a cute little, ooh, let's go for a walk and talk about our grief. It is. I'm trying to make it as casual and approachable. I want everyone to feel comfortable. But the reason I'm doing this work is for a much larger purpose. It's to help build the future where everyone feels safe, everyone feels held, where everyone is free. My work is rooted in an imaginative liberation practice, imagining a liberated future. And what does that look like, and how do we get there? And what is my role? And what is my role to get us there, to help get us there? And my role as a death worker is to help build these spaces of community where we can talk about our grief and build that trust and solidarity between us. So I think I'll leave it there for now. Like I said, if you are in Seoul and you're available April 26th, yeah, please join us. My website is hafezdeathcare.com, Hafez, Hafez. And there's a sign-up form there. It's free to attend. And I hope it's helpful. I hope it's helpful for people with their own personal grief that they're going through. But I also hope it helps people see that this grief work is necessary and needed on a larger scale. And that by them coming, by attending an event like this and working to process their grief and allowing others to witness their grief and help them process it, that they know that this work of working through their grief is activism in the way that it is helping to build the future, helping to build a liberated future where we can count on each other and depend on each other for that emotional support. Because grief's going to affect all of us. None of us, not a single person in this world will get through life without experiencing grief. And so we need to find a way to support each other through that. I hope you feel inspired to join a grief event near you. Find people in your community who you can talk to openly in public. If you're not able to join the Grief in Public event that I'm hosting, there are events happening all over the world. Find your local death workers, the death doulas and grief guides that are here to help build this future that we all need. We're everywhere, and there's more of us every day. Find your local death worker and let them help you. Yeah, that was today's episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming along on this journey. I'm so excited to see where it goes. Bye.